Good morning, everyone, and welcome back at ECCMID TV. Very happy to welcome you back here live from our studio in Pavilion 1 at the ECCMID 32nd edition Congress Center here in Lisbon, Portugal. We are bringing this TV series to you live, and I'm very happy to introduce to you two people that I get to interview the coming 15 minutes or so. I have with me in my farthest corner here Dr. Marco de Ambrogi from London, and next to him is Dr. Neil Stone, also from London, and both are contributing to the open forum sessions. Marco, I believe yours is today at 12:15.
Yes,
it's about an hour. It's
soon.
in Arena 1, very close to where we're broadcasting from this TV series. Your open forum session is titled Ethical Issues in Infectious Diseases. And I believe you'll be sharing a little bit of more information on the conflict of interest and how to manage this, probably because of your role as an editor at the Lancet Group, right?
Absolutely.
Could you comment a little bit more on that?
Yes, so they invited me to take part to this open forum and to talk about conflict of interest. As an editor for the Lancet Group, where I worked for the last 8 years, I confront with the conflict of interest on a daily basis, and of course it's a very important issue that we need to address. And so my talk will just be describe the different situations where a conflict of interest may raise, how we can address it, how we can recognize it, and maybe even how we can prevent it, or at least put in place some measures to address it.
So what are at this time the difficulties that you encounter with conflict of interest as an editor?
Well, of course, conflict of interest may impact on the decision, maybe peer reviewers make when judging other people's articles. So there might be a bias when their articles are assessed. Authors may have a conflict of interest, they may have commercial interest, they may have financial interest in promoting certain products. Governments may have interest in sort of hiding or minimizing certain worrying features that are observed in hospitals, and so they might discourage researchers in presenting data that put in a bad light certain areas of public health. So there may be very different situations where conflict of interest impacts on the quality of information that is provided. And I think with the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen science becoming the main topic in TVs and all media. And everybody had an opinion on COVID-19. Everybody could say anything. And
everyone feels they're an expert also.
Yeah, and everybody was, in a way, allowed to say what they thought on TV. But I think for a general audience who needs to receive the information on how to behave during a pandemic, talking specifically, it's quite dangerous not knowing if the people that are speaking have a conflict of interest, if they are pushing their own agenda. Mm-hmm. And of course, we have seen the intersection of politics and science a lot for public health measures. And so even advisory boards and people who advise governments and politicians themselves, of course, they're pushing their own agenda. And so when they made the decisions, of course, they were influenced by their own interests. And so it's quite a tricky area, especially when I
can imagine, yes. So making the disclosures is very important.
Transparency is
But
paramount.
how, from an editorial point of view, do you weigh that? Because information coming from someone who does have a conflict of interest is not per se worthless, right?
No.
So how do you manage that?
All authors need to submit forms where they declare the conflict of interest that are quite detailed, so we have that kind of information. And reviewers for peer review of articles, they need, again, to disclose any conflict of interest. And so, that's the best that we can do, and then we use our own judgment case by case. But of course, there is a level of trust that we need to have towards the research community, because maybe financial conflict of interest are easier to spot, because if someone has commercial shares of a pharma company, it's quite clear that might be bias in judging something. But if it is a personal conflict of interest, if they don't like the other researcher, if they have a family member that they want to promote, if they have a personal agenda or or if they received some gifts that, of course, they are not in the public eye, it becomes quite difficult to know if they are influencing their judgment by that. And
so the editors, do they make their weighing of the conflict of interest on a more subjective level, or are there objective parameters that you can hold on to?
No, it's more case by case. Because of course, if someone has shares for a pharma company, it might not mean that he cannot judge articles on a different topic, and so each case needs to be assessed to see if that potential bias is really dangerous, and if we need other people to assess a different paper, and so it's our call, and we always discuss ethical issue as a team, because I mean everybody has his own opinion, and so it's important to have consensus.
Well, it's a very important topic. What are your hopes and expectations from the open forum?
I think I'm really fascinated by ethics. It is not my background, but of course I work in it. It is part of my work. And I've seen there is a session on vaccine equity, which I think it is incredibly important. We have seen the disparities in access to vaccine around the world, and if COVID-19 seems to be almost over for our developed countries, rich countries, it will be there for many years for low and middle income countries, and the access to vaccine is one of the factors that will play against poorest countries to get over COVID-19. So I think it would be really interesting hearing the speaker talk about vaccine inequities and maybe how we can address that and what we can do.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, thank you, Marco. Neil, you are also contributing to an open forum. Yours is tomorrow, also at 12:15 to 1:15,
That's
also
right.
here at the Arena 1, close to our studio. And yours is actually on social media. The title of the open forum is Twitter the next infectious diseases textbook? Can you answer that question for us? Do you believe Twitter is the next textbook?
I think that's what we're going to try and answer in the open forum, and it's going to be interesting to see what people say. It's exciting to be invited to talk on a topic which is it's really accidental for me, I suppose. You know, I'm a clinician.
Because were you a big tweet?
I was a regular user, but really it was COVID, unsurprisingly, which made it really take off. I guess for a few reasons. First of all, a lot of people were at home during lockdown, so they were on their, laptops and mobile phones a lot more looking for information. And then it was just something which was the dominant news story of the day worldwide. So not only the medical community wanted to know about it, but the public at large. So suddenly, from being a kind of very niche area of infectious disease doctors and microbiologists, suddenly it exploded into being something which the public wanted to know about. And it really just took off in the last couple of years. So that's why I think this is the first ever session at ECCMID on Twitter, which reflects the new age we're in, really.
So was it easy to dive into Twitter when you were thrown into it because of the pandemic? Or are there certain rules for Twitter how do you say it? How do you know how to behave on Twitter?
So that's a good question.
Fairly new.
Yeah, so it's something which happened for me kind of organically. I didn't plan it. There are things you pick up as you go along. There are principles you really need to stick to. For example, medical confidentiality and ethics we've been hearing about. That applies just as much to Twitter as anywhere else, if not more, because the audience you reach is so huge. And there have been some really unfortunate episodes where people have tweeted out by accident confidential information. So that's clearly critical.
Because I can imagine, do you Twitter on your own account, or from your personal, or as a professional?
So that's a really good question, actually. And one of the problems with Twitter, and probably one of the things we'll address tomorrow, is this blurred dividing line between what is your personal view and what represents your work. So on my account, or on most of our accounts, I actually have a disclaimer which says that these are my personal views only. However, we all know that it doesn't really work like that. Whatever I say will be inevitably associated with my workplace. And you always have to bear in mind that responsibility that if you say something controversial or outrageous, of course you're entitled to your view, but that might have consequences on your organization as well. So really, you have to be mindful of that. But all of this is really evolving. It's very new. And you mentioned a set of rules. It's a little bit like the Wild West out there, but gradually we have developed some ways of making sure you do it in a fun way and in an educational way, but also safely and ethically.
Yeah, so the position of social media in the field of infectious diseases medicine has changed rapidly. Do you think it'll change even more now that, the pandemic has enabled this kind of on-site live encounters again? Or do you think it's there to stay? Is it sustainable?
I absolutely think it's there to stay. I think, not just in infectious disease, but in medicine and really all fields, it's really has a tremendous power as a tool for networking, obviously, being social media, and connecting in a professional way. Something we're going to address tomorrow is its educational purpose. You asked, is it going to be the new ID textbook? I don't think it's going to be to replace traditional methods, but it's certainly a great addition. And really, it's a tremendous forum for educational experiences, conferences like this, people giving their take or their interpretation of new papers. And it also is very good at breaking down hierarchies. So for example, at a meeting like this, if you have someone who's maybe quite junior, or maybe quite a shy person, and it's quite intimidating at a massive conference like this to speak to a professor in the field, but in Twitter you just send a message and they will reply, so it's much easier to engage. So I think
absolutely,
it's really got a real place in infectious diseases medicine, as in many fields, and I think it's here to stay, absolutely.
Yeah, you can reach a whole lot of people in just a split of a second.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's very different, but there's also, of course, a drawback that you already hinted on, that how can you guarantee the high quality of the information that you're sending out into the whole world in the split of a second?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a number of drawbacks. So certainly quality control is one, and that there is effectively none. So tweets don't undergo peer review, as you might do.
No conflicts of interest.
Or conflict of interest, absolutely right. And also there's this issue of disinformation. So also we touched a little bit upon politics and medicine, and that's huge on Twitter. Sometimes it's just people's particular view that they espouse, which is fine, and that's their right to do. But unfortunately, there is a sinister side where there are actually active campaigns of disinformation, which promote, for example, anti-vaccine messaging or conspiracy theories, which can gain a lot of traction. So that's really the flip side to Twitter, and we really need to find strategies to address that in a way which is ethical, protects people's right to their views, but doesn't actively do harm. So again, that's something which is a big problem in Twitter. It reaches a huge audience, as I said, but that also reaches audience of some people who don't have the best intentions, can be quite abusive and harmful online as well, without any moderation. So we really need to find steps to address that, and that's something I think we'll probably discuss at tomorrow's open forum.
And is it your personal belief that infection disease doctors have a moral or an ethical obligation to participate on social media like Twitter to get the right information out there?
I don't think it's I don't think it's an obligation, but I think it's a useful method for those who want to do it, and I would encourage people to do it. I mentioned disinformation.
What does it bring you? What does it give you?
I think it really started for me as an outlet at the start of the pandemic, where I just wanted to share my experience and counter some of the disinformation. So for me personally, it was therapeutic in a way. But then quickly I realized that I could actually put out a message of what I was seeing on the ground as somebody who had an insight, because I was treating patients with COVID. And I saw people were interested, but I also saw the disinformation, and I felt, I'm not sure about a moral obligation, but maybe a professional opportunity to try and counter some of that with some factual information about what I was actually seeing. And that's clearly, it's really evolved over the last 2 years of the pandemic in particular.
Marco, is it something you would consider doing, getting out there on Twitter?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, at the moment I'm not very engaged, but I think it's very important. And I think the pandemic has shown us as, I'm a former researcher, so I feel part of the ID community even in that sense, if I'm not a clinician. But I think it has shown us that the importance of communicating infectious diseases, science, medicine, to a general audience, and in a way also what was our failure at the beginning of the pandemic, and how we were obliged to learn how to use new tools and how to reach people and how to counter out misinformation. So I mean, it has been a steep learning curve, and it will continue to be something like that. And I mean, and even as a journal, we're really interested in sort of developing and not staying as we were before the pandemic. We need to learn, even as editors, to communicate better and to use the social media in a way to reach readers and the general community that we are serving, which is our scope in the end.
Well, turning it around and progressing into the digital world or era, do we still need meetings like this? Connecting live?
I think so. I think it's amazing to meet people in person, and the personal connection with people is paramount, in my opinion. I mean, I work at the computer every day, and most of the people I work with are people I never met. But then in the meeting like this, it is my chance to meet them in person.
Yeah.
And to sort of forge, I'm talking about conflict of interest, to forge bonds, but the bonds are just meeting someone in person gives that kind of connection that allows us to work well together, if they need to ask me questions, they feel free to do that. And I think it's very important. So I don't think these meetings will become old in format in any form.
So social media should not be the objective per se, but is a tool to increase the connectivity.
Tool, and we cannot ignore that.
To get science to the next level. Well, yeah, thank you so much. Well, I really hope that the open forum will be visited well by a lot of attendees. I could heartily recommend it to all of you. And please come see them today at 12:15 in Arena 1. I cannot remind you enough. The Open Forum, Ethical Issues in Infection Diseases, will be here with Marco de Ambrogi also as one of the speakers. And tomorrow at 12:15, same place, we have the Is Twitter the Next ID textbook Open Forum with Dr. Neil Stone. Neil and Marco, thank you very much for coming here to our TV studio. We will be back with you at noon exactly live, where we will be hosting our Lucky Wheel of Fortune. So if you want to claim a really great prize, such as a big prize in the form of a basic membership for ESCCMID for 1 year, or several really, really cool must-have gadgets with the ECCMID logos or the ESCCMID logos on it, please come back here at noon. There is a Zoom link in which you can apply, and then hopefully I will see you here on the big screen behind me, and maybe you will get selected to let me spin the lucky wheel for you and help you win some really great prizes. So let's see you back at noon, and thank you for watching. Until then.